thank you all for being here. And so I want to get off to talking about the excitement of all the things that we've discussed today, particularly student centricity and the focus on effective learning are the key talking points a lot of times when it comes to the why of we're doing this digital transition. So what excites you about the potential for the refocus on student and effective instruction? So Greg, you want to start?
Yeah. I think Chris and I hit the circuit, about 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Back when we developed the state definition for personalized learning, personalized teaching, and educational technology. And we were cautious to make sure we kept the educational technology definition as separate because this all still boils down to really good instruction. And that's kind of the one thing that we know is going to move the needle. I often will say that you can have personalized learning and you can do personalized teaching without technology, other maybe pen or pencil, very little technology. But I think I could also make a strong case that you can do it better with the technology. And, from the state education agency, we've been really focused on the correct use of the technology because we see it all. We see the canned online programs, we see really good infusion of technology. So in terms of what excites me, I think that as we see more technology infused and it becomes more ubiquitous in schools, I think we're also starting to learn more about how effectively to use that technology and how we can really leverage it for student ownership. The role of the teacher has kind of been evolving, and not to say that it's becoming any less important. I would say in personalized learning and in competency-based education, it actually becomes more critical, but it's different than it was. And so there's kind of this new skill set. So for me, I'm excited about us being able to use the technology better as we learn more about it. I think the research has gotten a lot more robust over the past 3 to maybe 5 years on educational technology and what it is and what it isn't, and what we know about how good technology can improve student outcomes.
Great.
Yeah, well said. All of that. And what really excites me as well is the fact that we're talking about the student at the center of the instruction. Back when I started 25 years ago, it was the class, right? My lesson plans were around the class or the course. So to talk about this personalized learning or the student-centered approach, it's really nice to see the kid at the center of that conversation, and then to really be able to reimagine what that looks like, because I don't think we've given ourselves the autonomy to be able to do that. So to put that conversation out there, to reimagine space in the classroom, to reimagine learning strategies based on research and what works, I think is exciting. We have to be careful not to overwhelm the teacher. We talked about that earlier today, and to provide appropriate support structures for those teachers. But it's an exciting time, and I think if we do it right, and if we do it well with the right support structures, and look at what research is telling us, I think this can be great for our kids. And I think at some point we really don't have a choice right now. We have to do this, and we have to do it well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I've been working in online learning for about a decade in Michigan. It's amazing how much has changed. And in the mindsets of we talked a bit about like just the general public in particular and how that has evolved in particular. I think when things first move online or kind of early stage adoption, all it is information, right? And information is not instruction. And to see the transformation of schools move through that process and get to areas where we say, oh my gosh, this is actually working for kids. It's achieving the outcomes you want. And then that leads not just to excitement, but also frustration, because you're like, man, that's only happening in a quarter of the Michigan schools. And how do we bring that to scale? And how do we look at that? But that focus on the student allows us to have totally different conversations, right? And challenge assumptions or old phantom ties. And I think that brings a kind of level of excitement and curiosity to the professional development and learning process that engages people.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything that you all have already addressed as well. A couple of things that I've seen so far, just in the classroom, just working with teachers and students, is one, students are already ready for this. You know, I mean, we're now at the point when a student says, "What do you mean I can't turn it in this way?" Or, "What do you mean that doesn't work?" It can. It literally can. So our students are coming, whether we're ready for it or not. You know, so that's a really big thing. To tie back into sort of what technology can do, though, as well, I think immediate feedback is such a great component to add to the classroom. Quick example, real quick. One of our teachers, we just adopted a learning management system in our district this year, and one of our teachers was using the assessments features, and she was saying that she loves the fact that it does allow her to adjust her instruction for the very next day. She had been giving a similar test for the past couple of years with similar questions, but she was able to see specifically that question number 3, 67% of all of her students got it wrong, right? So it allowed her to really take a look at that question and say, is it something that I wasn't able to cover so well? Why aren't students doing well on this? Or is it just a crummy question too? Mm-hmm. So it really allowed her to take a look at that. And she could have done that, I think, with the paper and pencil tests, but it would just be tougher to see. This data was right in front of her immediately, and so it allowed her to change that instruction the very next day.
Very good, thank you. So that kind of segues us into the next question of what is the most important work you or your organization that you work for, whether it's the state or the county level RESA or the state virtual school or the school district. What's the most important work you're doing now to advance kind of where you are at this point with digital learning at any, in your organizations to where you want it to go? Is it policy? Is it pedagogy, professional development? Chris, you want to start?
Sure, that's fine. I would say 2 areas, and I'm going to try to remember what my second one was.
Chairman knows.
Yeah, right. It's all good. It's all good. So the very first one, obviously, is going to be not just pedagogy, but just mindset, right? I think that that's a big thing, and that's something that we talked about today, actually, is just allowing teachers to feel comfortable breaking things. I think that that's really important for us. And so that's something that we're doing. We just went bring your own device at our middle school level right now. And one of the things that we've been working with teachers is always focusing on the learning goals first and seeing if any type of technology can tie in with that. Big shout out to Liz Kolb over at the University of Michigan. She wrote a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, it's called Learning First, Technology Second. And that's the biggest thing that you always want to focus on is what are our learning goals? Can this extend? Can it enhance? Does it allow our students to engage within the learning targets that are out there? So that's a big thing. But another big focus area that we do in our district, and we've started doing this and we are going to continue doing so, is really reaching out to our community to talk about finding a healthy balance. The more we do include technology into our classrooms, especially bring your own device in a district that we haven't had that previously, we do get concerns from parents saying, how much screen time is too much screen time? Where do we go with this? And so we've had conversations with parents. We've had a parent night. We did something on a Saturday actually as well too. Just really trying to figure that out together. And the interesting part is we all don't have the answers, but where can we come to a happy medium? Really stressing with our parents as well too that the relationship is the number one thing that we want with our teachers and students. That can never really be taken away. And so this really isn't a conversation about all screens at all times, but using it when it's going to be the right fit. But that's a really important conversation that we want to have with our community as well too as technology continues to be used in the class.
Very good.
You remember the second one? Thanks. On the student side of our effort and our work, I think one of the most exciting things right now is what we call a collaborative model. The Michigan Virtual School has existed for 20 years, and at the beginning, no one was asking for it. There were people saying, I wish we had online courses that could take kids out of our building and help prepare them. We're now, and part of that fear was really around the sense that maybe that this was going to replace teachers. Even though the Michigan virtual model has always had a highly qualified certified teacher within it, in the last handful of years, the concern about online is changing in particular, and what we're working with school districts to do is to use their teachers to teach our courses, which to some extent has been really challenging internally because it's been part of our identity, and there's always like, oh, well, we know what we get when we have our own teachers, kind of like what a district, we know what we get when we educate our own kids. Taking a deep breath and letting somebody else have that, teach those teachers. But one of the most interesting dynamics that we've done is we ask, because if you're going to be teaching our content, we want to screen your teachers. So you go ahead and pick, and you say who you think might be a good fit for this online learning, but we're gonna weigh in on that. So we put them through a tool, and really the tool is meant to talk all about whether they're focused on students. If you're credentialed, you're probably going to know your subject area just fine, okay? If you don't know the technology, we'll teach you that. If you don't think that kids, learn a certain way, if you think it's just information, whatever, it's not gonna mesh, right? And so we kind of provide them with the feedback of the tool and say, we think these guys will translate well online and totally stay away from this population. So it's a different role for us in thinking about that, and then they're getting content, and we're probably in about 5 different districts right now. We're slowly rolling out this new model, and it's pretty exciting for us to see and have those different conversations and probably deeper partnerships with the school district. On the professional learning side, are any of you guys in the early literacy space or working with the essential practices that exist in the state? So that's been really a phenomenal approach, and a statewide approach, and to a significant challenge. There's like 35,000 teachers, K-3, who need to be trained in the 10 essential literacy practices that they want with every child, every day, in every classroom. And we didn't come up with that stuff. That's not our area of expertise, but the General Education Leadership Network and MAISA and a whole bunch of organizations have put together the thinking about what should that happen? What does that look like? Well, then, to bring that to scale, and to bring it to scale quickly with fidelity, is a big challenge. And the online components, or the digital components of that, can only play a certain piece. And so there's training that is available online, but that is married with an entire set of coaches that are the boots on the ground looking at how it's being implemented in the system. And that kind of blended component, I think, is really powerful and an exciting way to see professional development roll out that I can't really think of a whole lot of other ones like on a state level approach than what this one and this new model has.
I think we'd be really interested in looking at the results of your interview process and selection process for teachers as you go through that, of what's okay, brick and mortar day to day, but what's okay online, just to inform a lot of states, because I don't know any
Yeah,
of
because
them.
all the colleges have done these studies about their failures in distance education and distance learning, and it did come down to a lot of human problem, but from my recollection, the data was more concrete on the quality of the UI UX. If the UI UX isn't good, it's the difference between the green screen and Apple.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
That's a huge difference, and the rest of it's human. So I'm really interested in that.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, so at the county level, we're the largest ISD in Michigan, and we have the most diverse school districts with a wide variety of needs and challenges and opportunities. So in terms of what defines our work, in instructional technology, we really look at equity as one of the biggest challenges. We've got schools that have everything and anything and are doing really well. And then we've got schools that are struggling with access to usable laptops and devices. So that's one of the challenges that we have to overcome. And then how do we provide professional development for all these different school districts, right? When you've got so many different needs. And so one of the things that we like to do at the county level is to bring leaders like Chris, and I've got some of the Plymouth Canton folks here. We bring leaders together through our quarterly meetings, and we have them network, and we have them talk about what's working well, what's not, what are the challenges. So that is something that at a county-wide level, it's really nice to be able to do, is tap into these experts and to say, let's learn from one another. because I'm not in every building, I'm not in every district, I don't see your day-to-day challenges, but I know that all of you connected can help each other. So that's a really nice opportunity at the county level for people to be able to network and solve problems together and to share. We've been able to share online content together, we've been able to share strategies together. When Chris mentioned Dr. Liz Kolb's book, that was one of the book studies that we did at the countywide level with our leaders, is to say what is our common language that we can even talk about in terms of effective use of instructional technology or effectively using technology in teaching and learning. And so we decided to do a book study around that. And so we all now have that common understanding. And so we look at what are your learning targets, as Chris mentioned, and then how do we develop practices and strategies and experiences based on how to best meet that learning standard or learning goal. Another thing we talk about is professional development, right? We know in Michigan there's a big challenge with sub shortage. So the days of bringing teachers into our countywide PD days or any of those opportunities are very limited now. So that's a challenge that we are still working on. We've tried online, we've run MOOCs, and you get a nice handful of teachers, 20, 30 at a time. But when you look at the county, Wayne County, that's a small drop in the bucket. And how do we scale that up, as a few people mentioned? So we are looking for opportunities in making sure that we are developing the right UI, UX experiences for those teachers, and then hopefully have that play out into the student experience, that when we create those learning environments, they're engaging, they're effective, and then couple them with that relationship factor that we keep talking about. That relationship factor is huge. For me to have a relationship with Chris and be able to tap into him and say, hey, how are you doing with this learning management system? And have him tap into some of the other districts is so critical. So I think all of these things are challenges, yet opportunities for us to be exploring together.
I think probably the most relevant part for this conversation is goal number 2, which is essentially, ensuring quality educational systems for students. And a large part of that work now is revolving around competency-based education. And so, we're looking at different ways of delivering instruction, different ways of reporting what students know and what they can do, advancing students when they're ready. So we've done a lot of work on the policy side to kind of expose some of the flexibility that's out there. With any audience, I invite people to call us if they have an idea, if they're struggling with something. I would say 99% of the calls that we get for somebody that's kind of struggling with some kind of barrier, we can usually find a way to make it work for them. The other 1% is something that we're maybe not allowed to do because of the U.S. Department of Ed or something that's in state law. But really kind of looking at that flexibility, but then also leveraging some of the networks that we've forged. So, Phil with Armada is one of the folks that we've been engaging with a lot over the past several months through our 21J pilot. And it wasn't a lot of money. It was only $500,000, but we had 7 districts that applied and were awarded the grants. But really what it did is it allowed us to coalesce around a network around competency-based education and to share a lot of those ideas. And when you look at that, and then you look at the relationship with competency-based systems to personalized learning, personalized teaching, and then how the education technology is used, you can kind of start to see a system that talks about students being at the center and then redesigning our educational systems. I would say on the resource side, we're also very proud of the work we've done around open educational resources. We think this is kind of the next big thing in terms of us being able to offer, content, resources, and other things for educators, teachers, administrators, curriculum directors, high quality materials that have been vetted in some way, that are organized in an intuitive way. I mean, there's tons of resources out there. The challenge sometimes for teachers, I think, is, what do you choose and how do you know it's quality? So we're trying to address some of those. We're working with Joe and Michigan Virtual also on, when we have conversations about online and blended learning, how are we ensuring that the quality is there, and how are we kind of talking the same language about what we think quality is? So I would say those are kind of the three-ish big things that we're doing at the department to address goal number 2.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you. So, in the next question I'll ask, things like social emotional learning, personalized and specialized professional development, understanding digital instructional design, administrative redesign, AR, VR, and a lot of other topics that you've heard us talk about are all, hot topics. So what are your thoughts on, any or all of these and their, the impact on the work you see being done and education going forward?
Yeah, we see social and emotional learning as a critical component. We have a draft, some of you may have seen it, pretty final form, a profile of a graduate. And within that, we have kind of these 4 big characteristics, which all content areas, CTE, early childhood, multiple standards, if you will, kind of boil down into these 4 things like problem solving, the ability to communicate and collaborate, ability to use technology and tools, argument and reasoning. And then we have social and emotional learning at the center. And in Michigan, we've adopted the Counsel model. So those 4 kind of high-level competencies in social and emotional learning that you can get broken down by actual kind of grade bands. So we consider it a priority, and we're working it into our guidance and our language at the department.
Awesome, thank you.
So you mentioned a whole lot: social
Yep.
emotional learning, personalized learning, AR, VR.
Yeah.
So I think all of those are important, but I will echo what Greg just said in terms of social emotional learning is being critical. If you don't take care of that child's social emotional learning needs, the rest is sort of secondary, and sometimes learning just can't happen when a student is struggling with all of those. So unless you meet the needs of the kids at a core level, then you're not able to move on to the next level. So that is critical. One of the things I do like what the MDE is doing is they've come up with a whole child model where they are focusing on that whole child tied in with the community and providing support structures for social emotional learning, not just from your internal school community, but external community members. So I think that's exciting, and that's something for us to look at collaboratively. In terms of some of the other things that you mentioned, I think as long as we connect them to things that we are currently doing and they make sense and they're part of your why, we talked about the why earlier, then you can make good use of those things. But to keep throwing things at teachers to say, okay, today or this month we're gonna try VR, AR, we're gonna try personalized learning, you do blended learning while you try something else. I think that's what causes a lot of confusion and chaos in schools. So let's have a common focus and a mission and a vision of what that looks like, and then follow it through with providing proper coaching, support, job-embedded PD, and allowing teachers a space to just try these things and to fail. And it's okay, and say, you know what, you tried it, let's try it a different way. Let's not give up on that. So just building that structure and that community of trust and growth, I think, is so critical regardless of what you do. But going back to the social emotional learning is critical.
Yeah, I would say the same. SEL is probably the biggest one on our radar, and I won't share too much about that because my colleagues have. AI, I think, is going to be the key part for being able to differentiate the roles that we were talking about earlier and the different pieces for teaching and student support. I think that's going to be a huge wave to be on top of. And you didn't mention this, but if you may, I want to go with one that's not on your list. How about home delivery of food? As a very interesting new thing. Any of you guys Blue Apron people? Anything like that? All right. So I say it only slightly in jest, but think about how the technologies in other sectors have transformed small big things. No. So here's a thought. You guys are familiar with cyber schools, right? Mm-hmm. We have somehow figured out how to deliver instruction without anyone coming to a building. But we bought into an idea that it would be impossible for us to figure out how to get those kids food. And yet we know that the reason we have food programs in our brick and mortar building is because it helps student outcomes, right? Some kids, it would be the only time they get a meal in that day, right? Makes you rethink snow days a bit. The premise that we are not able to provide food to those students is no longer a reality.
No, Amazon can get you ice cream on the front door within an hour in Sacramento.
Right. So
In a cold one.
it changes the paradigm a bit, right? It starts to ask a really interesting question about like, well, okay, maybe that's something we have to rethink. Maybe it's something that we need to invest in because it may actually pay off in terms of student performance and well-being and so on. And potentially, we're in a state right now where the conversation is about, well, should we cut funding from a program? And, I think the governor's proposal was 80%, something like that, 80% funding for the cyber school. And I asked myself, well, maybe let's expect more. Let's ask them, to increase, try something they haven't done before. And so I just think about these seemingly disconnected ideas that make us go, maybe it is possible. And those kind of crosswalking the technologies or bring them in from other sectors to say, what does that look like in education? Is something important for us to keep on the radar.
We talk about funding. At the same time, we have to make sure that we have accountability measures in place that are transparent,
Yeah.
right? So we've got for-profit companies where we don't know where some of that money's going. So, just saying, right?
Big salaries for NGOs.
So again, if you're going to ask for money, let's be transparent and accountable for that money. We are. I know everything that we spend in our building, in our districts. It's out there on the dashboard. We have public meetings that talk about every little dime that's spent. I would like the same for all of these other schools that are out there, even that are by for-profit organizations. I think one of the best things that you can get out of any PD, any opportunity is to network, right? And I feel like we did that today. So thank you for allowing us that time to network, talk to one another. We threw out some grandiose ideas across tables about what could we do, what could this look like, reimagine spaces, reimagine our time. So thank you for allowing for that time and space to be able to do that, to learn from Armada and the amazing work that they're doing. I would not have known about that if I had not attended, so I appreciate learning about some of the neighboring schools. And come back, and I think let's next time make it bigger and better.